What's the scariest gut feeling you had that came true? Thanksgiving 2004. Dreamt there'd be a massive wreck on I-5. Decide to head to dinner early to avoid the time I dreamt of. Narrowly escaped a 12-car semi pile up by 30 seconds. Watched it in my rearview mirror. Now death will come back for you. I think a gut feeling led to me not being kidnapped. I was maybe 9 at the time. I was in a department store, wandering on my own when all of a sudden the most terrible, gut-wrenching feeling came over me. I don't know how, but I knew I had to get back to my mom. I ran to the aisle she was in. A man hurriedly followed me into the aisle. When he saw I was with my mother, he stood there for a few seconds and stared at me before walking away. I will never forget that feeling, or his terrifying face. Jesus. Had a gut feeling my house was on fire. Checked. It was. Maybe that gut feeling was your sense of smell. I worked at a hospital and frequently picked up extra shifts. I worked overnights and had asked the supervisor to go ahead and put me down to work the next night. Well, as the night went on, I just felt awful. Like completely doomed. I had never wanted so badly to be home. I lived an hour away from my job, so by the morning I called the supervisor and asked her to remove me from the schedule. So I went home, feeling unexplainably scared. By the time I woke up, I was getting calls that an EF5 tornado had hit the town I worked in and the hospital I worked at. What if everyone thinks you did it? I was talking to my mom when she was coming back from an event, and this wave of worry came over me. I said, "Mom, be safe, alright? I'm sorry for arguing with you. I love you." Not even 30 minutes later, my sister texts me that they were hit by another car. I started panicking and crying. And then she said, "But we're alright. I've never argued with my mom again. You don't know what you've got till it's gone." This is why I always tell my parents I love them after talking to them. Even if it's an argument and we're annoyed with each other, or my mom calling me to ask me about a simple task, I always tell them I love them, because those would be the last words I want to share with them in case anything happened. That the deer would run out onto the road. Something in my head told me to slam on the brakes. So I did. I ended up taking fur off of its butt, barely clipping it. That's your subconscious doing its job. You probably saw the deer or evidence of the deer, and even before you realized you saw it, your brain was already looking out for you. Good guy brain. Couple of posts today are bringing me back to a sad place. I was going to bed and thought to myself that I should turn up my phone volume in case someone called me in the night with something serious. I had no reason at all for that kind of thinking. 5 AM, my dad tells me my 57-year mom was taken to the emergency room. She died 5 days later. Had a dream my ex left me for a specific guy. Even talked to her about it. They're married now. You planted the seed. Fun story: couple weeks ago, my GF knew for the first time in 4 years where she wanted to go for dinner. When we got there, she dumped me. Knew something was wrong the whole time, but everything was fine when I'd ask. At one point she refused to hold my hand and I asked her one more time. "Gotta really? You want to do this here?" By the time I was 13, my mom had been battling cancer for a year and a half. It was a few days after my birthday, and she was due for an IV port surgery the following morning. Just a simple day surgery, right? She came to my room to say goodnight, and I freaked out. For some reason, I knew this surgery would not go well. This is after she had lung surgery and multiple bouts of chemo and radiation on her chest and brain. She reassured me that it was fine, and that we would go bowling a few days later. She never returned home. During the surgery, her remaining full lung collapsed, and it went entirely downhill from there. Just over a month later she passed away. I have no idea what caused my fear of that being the end. But unfortunately I was right. I used to work as a nurse in an old people's home. I had great contact with one of the little old ladies there. One night, after having helped her get to bed, I said goodnight. See you tomorrow. Knowing I was coming in the next morning. Oh no, she said merrily. I don't think we'll see each other tomorrow. It felt kind of off and I went home feeling strange about it. When I came into work the next morning, she had died peacefully in her sleep. No more than a few hours after I'd left her. When I was 12, my dad was a semi-truck driver. One day after school I had a horrible feeling about him going to work the next day. I had begged him in tears to stay home from work. But he just told me that he'd be home in time for dinner the next day. He died in an accident with another semi early the next morning. If my child ever begs me to stay home, I'm staying home. I woke up to like 4,219,804 calls from my family, literally everyone but my brother. I had a gut feeling something happened to him. Then my mom told me he had been in a car accident and they were still waiting for information about it. I had a gut feeling he was dead. I had never been so sure of something in my life. I'm pretty sure I went through the 5 stages of grief backwards. I started off with acceptance immediately. I pretty much accepted that he was dead even before my sister called me with the confirmation. My gut feeling was just that powerful, I guess. A friend asked me, do you remember that guy by the name Thomas P? I immediately knew he was dead. It wasn't usual. We were 18. It was the first ever of my friends who passed away. Hit by a bus. Like you. I went from acceptance to being scared like I said. It was the first person from my generation that died. Made me realize death is not only about my grandparents' generation. This is going to sound lame, but going up the escalator one evening after my soccer practice, I was thinking, what if I get up there and I see some woman get harassed by some guy? What would I do? Would I help? You know. Typical kid stuff, thinking about whether or not you would do the heroic thing. I then started thinking, what if this actually happens? And I thought about it before. Nobody will believe me. Then I thought, what if it does happen? And I actually thought about thinking about it, etc, etc. All that nonsense. I was about 13-14 years old and it was late. Really dark outside and almost nobody out. When I arrived to the top of the escalator and out of the subway, I see a woman walk past. Just as I see her, a drunken man starts yelling at her. Catcalling. Calling names. He sounded really violent and like he could actually harm her. He started jogging drunkenly towards her and out of nowhere, without even thinking about it, I just screamed out, "Hey." As the word came out, I remember thinking, "Shoo, idiot. Why did you do that? Now you are dead." And out of nowhere my mouth started going off again. "Leave her alone." Again trembling. Really scared. Being 13 and all. I remember feeling like I wasn't controlling my body or actions. They just happened. I was holding my soccer ball under one arm and my workout bag in my other, so wasn't really fit for running or fighting. Lol, fighting. I was 13. I was a twig at best. He turns to me and starts yelling insults. He starts walking towards me saying how he will kick my head in like you would kick that ball. I remember thinking, damn, I gotta run. But my legs refused. It felt wrong to run while she was still there. Knowing I couldn't fight or run, I just kinda circled him while scared shitless until she had walked away far enough. Then as he almost caught me, I jogged away in the same direction the woman went. I remember walking trembling, being really surprised at what I did because none of it was on purpose. It just happened. Words and actions came out of me like a renegade fart. Eventually, when we got far enough, the woman turned around and thanked me. I remember feeling like a major boss then and proud of myself. I told my parents and they didn't believe me. Told my best friend and he didn't believe me. So I stopped telling anyone. Not really mine, but I think it counts. My mom was going to the dentist a few years ago and she decided that she wanted to bring my brothers and I, but at the last second she said that we should stay home because she felt something wrong. Later that day I got a phone call from her and her voice was very weak, saying how I should not worry and that she would be fine. She was in a car accident and the passenger side where I always sit caved in at least 3 feet, and if I was sitting there, I would have been toast. I love you, Mom. When I was in my late teens I was hanging out with a friend in my room. Suddenly I started feeling panicky with something telling me to leave the house. I decided to listen to my gut and told my friend we had to go to the store right now. Went outside to find my dad passed out in his truck looking really sick and pale. Me and my friend pulled him out of the truck and he called 911 while I performed CPR on my dad and saved his life. Later found out he had overdosed and choked. Who knows what would have happened if I didn't have the overwhelming urge to walk to the store for no reason. I'm a triplet. One of my brothers bikes a lot. I got home from class one day and heard an ambulance going by. I was like, oh snapdragons, I hope my brothers are okay. Sure enough, 5 minutes later mum called and said bicycle bro done broke his leg. I hope he was okay. My brother had Rolandic epilepsy and while all of the doctors said it would be fine and he would grow out of it, I found myself laying awake every night unable to sleep, just focusing on the sound of his breathing and listening for a seizure. Then one night he had a seizure, and somehow I did not hear him. He died in his sleep. And it haunts me to know that I was likely laying there awake in bed unable to sleep and in the other room. His condition always scared me. Yet somehow I always thought it would be my dad that would die. He's a probation officer and I feared he would be killed at his job. And I would lie awake at night crying over imagined scenarios of his death. I may not have predicted the exact course of events, but pretty much all of my childhood fears came true. Ever since then, I've been unable to dismiss feelings of dread sometimes because, well, what if something else comes true?